I am so excited to welcome you to the WIIM Podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, same. I am excited to also bring somebody who is enthusiastic as I am about like the tech space and this really cool intersection between like creativity and influencer marketing, but also like on the tech side and just like appreciates that side of things. Like we're a rare breed. and I'm like excited to sort of dive into that stuff a little bit with you today. But before we do, I'd love for you, just in your own words, to just share a little bit about your journey to influencer marketing in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned rare breed. I did a podcast earlier this year, and unbeknownst to me, the host introduced me as a unicorn, which was like a really cool feeling. But I feel weird repeating that. But I do have like a funny mix of skills and background. I went to school and studied journalism. Then I worked in PR for a while. And then I started my own blog way back in 2006. And so I spent a really long time just, blogging and creating content. We had a team of writers that worked on that site. So really like a lot of familiarity with like that side of things, and then transitioned into what I'm doing now, which is InfluenceKit, which is a tool that helps brands and influencers do reporting more easily. So I'm the technical co-founder of InfluenceKit, so I'm also the guy who builds and writes all the code. So, if that makes me a unicorn, I guess I'll take that as a compliment.
It does. It does make you a unicorn. I don't meet people like you a lot. The people that we've had on this show certainly don't have the technical background, but like people know and I geek out on this show. Like I love that shit. I think it's so interesting. Tell us like further back into your background, like where did you learn the technical side of stuff? Like how did you get into blogging in the first place, and then PR? Like give us more details.
Yeah. I learned how to build websites because I had friends that were in bands, and somebody was like, can you make me a website? So that's like, and I learned how to code, when you could just view source on other people's web pages, and that's pretty much how you learn to do things. Things have changed a lot in the last 15, 20 years. So it's not that simple anymore, but it used to be, if you wanted to learn how to do something, you would just click view source and pick apart the HTML and figure out how it worked. So I kind of taught myself to code that way. And then, the blogging thing started because my wife and I had bought our first house, and we were in the middle of just like doing all these ridiculous renovations. We were young and we didn't really know what we were doing. So we just started blogging about it and writing about it. And that was Curbly. That's the name of my site. It started with really that focus, but then we kind of expanded and hired other people and started, talking about other topics, kind of expanding our reach. But, I just really enjoyed the intersection that blogging gave me, because in any given week, like, one day I might be building something like woodworking or like tearing out my ceiling and putting it back together. But then the next day I'm like editing a video or, writing code because I built our site. So it was cool. It really allowed me to flex a lot of different muscles and be creative in a lot of different ways, which I really enjoyed.
I can totally relate to that. Right. And just like, create like architecting that as your reality, because not a lot of people can say that. In fact, I feel like it's actually the opposite in so many instances where people are saying like, just focus on one thing. And I've had a very similar experience as you. Like I've always said, I'm like undiagnosed ADHD or like ADD. Yeah. And like, I don't know, I just enjoy like dabbling in different areas. It sounds like you do too. Do you feel like you should have focused on one thing or the other? Or do you feel like this is sort of a superpower that you've got?
Yeah, like the quote you always hear is the Jeff Bezos quote. He says like, put more wood behind fewer arrows, which sounds totally good. And I like, yes, he's Jeff Bezos, so he must be right. But like, if it's not your personality and that's not who you are, that might not work for you. So, I do think focus is really important, obviously. And you can get a lot done if you can find ways of disciplining yourself and focusing. But on the other hand, it's just not for everybody. Some people they need change and they need change of context. And I think I'm one of those people, I need to be able to like switch into different gears. So you kind of have to just, a lot of it is it's more about like knowing who you are and knowing what works for you, rather than just taking some advice that is out there and saying, and like forcing yourself to try to follow that. So should I have focused more? I mean, I have, when I started working on InfluenceKit, I did stop all the blogging stuff eventually, because I realized that, after 10 years of having done that, I was kind of ready for a change, and InfluenceKit gave me a great opportunity to like just jump into a new boat without really missing a beat. So so that was important. But like we were just saying before the call started, I was down in the basement tearing out concrete over the weekend. So I still find like lots of ways of keeping my brain, entertained, I guess.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, I'm a firm believer that each of those things informs the other too. Like they're not so siloed anyway. And even just
Totally.
like taking a weekend to dig up some, part of your basement and do something like that might give you the creative space in your brain that you needed for something to click in terms of InfluenceKit. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you,
Well,
but
I mean, actually, that's totally true. And I've actually written about this, but InfluenceKit, really came out of a side project that was kind of like a distraction for a long time. So I think it is true that if you allow yourself to have side projects and hobbies and other things, like you never know what those are going to turn into down the line. So I'm always supportive of people having, a couple other things going on, because you never know when 5 years from now you may be doing something and reach back, like in my case, into some code that you wrote 5 years ago that you didn't really have a use for, and now suddenly it's helping you with something. So
totally relate to that. Built a whole business off of a side project. So I am down with it. I'd also love to speak with you. Like, I always like to get people's opinions just on the industry in general. Like, you've been in it for such a long time. So I appreciate your perspective. Like, you've seen it change a lot over so many years from being in it. What are the best things you think that you're seeing in influencer marketing right now? And what are some of the things that you're like, I really wish this would change, evolve, or maybe even go away?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think we did our first sponsored post, which is what we kind of used to call it, for Curbly in 2009. So that was like, there wasn't even really a term for what we were doing. So it has changed a lot. It's kind of a tricky industry. It gets a lot of it gets no respect. Like it has almost become derogatory in some words to say I'm an influencer or I do influencer marketing, and that's too bad, because my experience with it from where I have been, it has been that like the people doing this are amazing. The people I know who are blogging and writing recipes and doing DIY videos on YouTube, and like they're incredible people. They're really, really passionate. They're really, really creative. A lot of them are really great businessmen and women, and they do it because they want to support a lifestyle that works for them. They want to be with their family, or they want to, like in my case, they like want to get their hands dirty every once in a while. So these people have like gone out over the last 10 years and created the creator economy, like this thing that exists. Like, it's not like Google came in and said like, oh, there will be this thing. This was like moms and food bloggers and fashion bloggers who like built this industry, like made it possible. And I think that's just amazing. Like, it's really, really cool. And the people that I know who are in it are just amazing people. And likewise, there's some really great brands out there who like understood that early on, and understood that there was a great potential for a partnership there that made sense, and that was a better way of reaching people than what was there before. So I think there's a lot of good there. It's kind of like my roundabout way of saying it. Like, I think there is a ton of goodness in what we're doing. There's also some hard stuff and some bad stuff. There's a lot of just like, flaky viral video type stuff, TikTok. I kind of like to hate on TikTok a little bit. I mean, I love TikTok. It's really cool, but there's also a lot of stuff on there that, there's just, I don't see the real like long-term value. It might just be like a quick hit, something that gets a lot of attention for some reason. But like as a brand, you're not really brand building when you do that. You're just kind of getting your name out there on some viral video. And I just don't think that that's the way to do it. Or maybe another way of saying that is like, that's just not the side of the industry that I really get excited about. So like I try to steer clear of that stuff, and maybe that works for some brands, but I'm just not, that just doesn't get me excited. I'm looking for the side of it where it's influencers who are really creating amazing, informative content, who really understand the brands that they're working with, who can really provide value like over a long period of time, brands who really like want to build relationships with influencers rather than just like getting something from them. Like it's not just, we'll pay you money, you do an Instagram post. Like that's not really a relationship. That's just a transaction. So at InfluenceKit, we're really trying to build a tool that helps foster that side. Like, let's build a strong relationship. I've been working with you for 3 years. I know everything about how your brand works. I know the lady who names the colors, of the paint. This is a real example. Like I met the woman who names the colors at Sherwin-Williams because we worked with that brand for so long. So like those are, I think, are really cool, productive relationships. And I want to see more of that kind of thing.
And you bring up such a great point. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find anybody who disagrees with you on that front, except like I love TikTok, but like it sounds like you do too. It's just there's little things on it, right? And I think I get your sentiment, which is that it maybe it's like the bottom of the funnel, but like the broad stroke of influencer marketing is so much more relationship based, so much more long term, so much like it has so much potential. So like let's focus on that more. But I think that it's a huge problem that I think it's really cool that you guys are trying to solve, because again, like you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who disagrees with you, but they run into the struggle of like, I agree with you, Bruno, but like, how do I do that? I'm trying to like do all of this at scale and I'm having difficulty managing it all. And so like, I want to hear more about InfluenceKit and sort of like, what would you say are like the biggest problems that InfluenceKit is looking to help solve?
Well, so I mean, number one, the biggest problem we solve is reporting. So we make reporting easy for brands and influencers. And I really want to just like emphasize the and influencers side of that because it's really important to us. Too often, I think reporting is looked at as like something that the brand or the agency needs to do or needs to worry about. And the influencer either doesn't care or like views it as this chore, or there's really no benefit in doing it for them. And part of the reason why reporting is difficult in influencer marketing is if you're an influencer and there's not really any benefit to you to doing the reporting, then it's going to be hard to motivate you to do it. So we make it easy for both sides. We want to make it really easy for the brand to do reporting. We also want to make it really easy for the influencer to give the brand that reporting and to view that report themselves. We're one of the few tools out there that actually helps the influencer look at the report because we think it's just as important for the content creator to see the reporting as it is for the person who paid for that content to get made. So that's really the first thing that we solve. Our tool is a little bit split into two sides. So we've got part of our tool that's really focused on influencers, and it's got like an editorial calendar, task management, reporting, a lightweight CRM, all these tools that are really geared at helping influencers do their job better. Like just from our years of doing that job and being pretty successful at it, saying like, this is the right way to do it. And if you want to grow your business as an influencer, like here are a bunch of tools that will help you. And then there's the brand and agency side, which is a little bit of like a mirror image. And it's just like, how do you set up your campaigns with influencers? How do you communicate the requirements, the deadlines? How do you get all the information back and forth really smoothly and easily? And then how do you get a report at the end of the day that actually means something, because there's reports out there that, you have to be a data scientist to understand like what's going on there. And, that just doesn't work for most brands. So our reports are really meant to be simple and really easily digestible so that you can kind of at a glance get a sense for how do we do here, what worked, and then communicate that to somebody up the chain. Because most of the time that's what you're going to have to do.
Well, and that's so key because with all of this stuff, like you always, of course, want to collect as much data as you can, but like, it's also what you do with that data. Because if it just sits around and you do nothing with it, then what's the point?
Right.
But like, in order to do that, you're dealing with a lot of like creatives, or essentially like just people who aren't data scientists. So the only way for them to do something actionable, meaningful with that data is to be able to have them fully understand it and have it be like, have ease of access to it. I think that's awesome that you guys are also focused on the creators as well. It's something that's really important to us here at WIIM personally, as like a women's focused organization. So we talk about like, you know, women like not necessarily diving into like all of the nitty gritty of their individual businesses and like the necessity to really take the reins and like own your business and like treat it as such, right? And so like in order to do that, you're going to have to go outside of your comfort zone in a lot of instances, and very few influencers have any sort of knowledge in like data and analytics. Yet on a regular basis, if they're doing well on the creative side, they're being asked to be a part of all these partnerships and contractually required to provide all those data.
Totally. I mean, listen, I remember, you know, I remember like the first time that I sold an ad on Curbly and the brand was like, you know, what's the CPM? And I had to like Google, like, what does CPM stand for? I mean, there's a lot of jargon in this industry. It's hard to know a lot of times what numbers you're actually being asked for. You know, I would say the number one thing I hear from influencers when I talk to them is that they don't have confidence. Like they are uncomfortable negotiating with a brand. They don't really understand their own value. They have a hard time asking for what they're worth, you know, and I do think it's you know, at the risk of making it like too gendered, it is an industry that is really dominated by women, at least in some of the niches that we work in. And, you know, look at our website, like you, as a blogger, you get no respect for that. You know, like you're a mommy blogger, you're a fashion influencer. Like these are all, you know, negative or derogatory ways. You have a lifestyle business. But we don't look at it that way. Like we look at it as like, you are an amazing content creator. You're probably a top-notch photographer, writer, salesperson. You're really organized. You're also like taking care of your kids in many cases. So we view that as our target like constituency on the influencer side. And so, yeah, it is really important to help those women feel empowered. Like, so that when a brand comes to them and says, well, what is your CPE going to be on this campaign? You're not just like, you can actually go to InfluenceKit, look up your last 3 campaigns. It'll tell you your CPE right there. And you can say, well, actually, it's going to be around this. Or if a brand comes to you and says, well, we want to give you granola for Instagram stories, you can say, well, you know, actually, this is my business and I have to charge for what I'm doing. Brands understand that, you know, like I talk to a lot of the brand people too. Like they really appreciate when they have a content creator who's just like able to say like, I have to make money and this is why, and I'm going to provide you with the evidence of like the service and the value that I'm providing for you.
And that's so key. I mean, that's what everybody's looking to prove. Like everyone is looking for, if we could sum it up in my, like in a few words, I feel like it's like everyone's just looking to prove their rock star status, right? Like everyone wants to look so good to whoever they report to, like the brand, the agency folks looking to report to their brands, you know, the influencers looking to report to whoever hired them. I mean, everybody. And so that's exactly what it is. Like they have to have the tools at their fingertips and like, outsource it to you guys, you know, like outsource it to be able to just say like, I'm going to pull it up. And I love that what you're talking about too is like in the process of negotiating rates. We talk about this all the time, right? Like you and I know, it sounds like we really, really respect influencers and what they do. But in a lot of instances, like I hear people talk about conversations all the time, like, oh, influencers, they're outpricing themselves. Like influencers, they're, you know, overcharging. And I'm like, no, I just don't think they're providing you the right insights to be able to quantify why they're charging what they are. And so to be able to put like verbs and sentences and like numbers and data and analytics behind it, like that really is going to change the game. I was literally on a conversation earlier on Clubhouse about like, the title of the room was something like, we're not like, don't accept any gifting partnerships anymore. Everything must be paid,
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's like a whole conversation. I 98% agree with that. There are
Yeah,
certain instances in which there is other value exchange that isn't
totally.
necessarily monetary,
Yeah.
depending on sort of where you are in your career. But I don't know. I just appreciate the heck out of you guys.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think, the same thing applies on the brand side, right? Like a lot of these brands, like, I think there's some misconceptions on the influencer side. Like they think like, because you're a brand that I've seen in the grocery store, therefore you must have $1 billion or you must have all this money. And it's not true. Like we talk to these brands all the time. Many of them are pretty small. They're small businesses. They don't have these huge unlimited marketing budgets. They have to be very careful with what they spend, and they have to be smart. They have to show some results for what they're doing. So, are influencers outpricing themselves? I think that probably does happen. And that's out there, but I think it might also be a question of, like what you said, just not showing the value that they delivered. Like if you're charging this much, but you're only showing this much value, but you actually delivered this much value, like you're not really overcharging. So I think that is what we're all about is let's make that relationship stronger so that the influencer has an easier time showing the brand, so that the brand has an easier time understanding what they're really getting for their limited, marketing budgets in many cases.
And so like what data points or like what do you think is like the most important thing for somebody to look at? Like, let's say they are like very new to influencer marketing, as a brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, I mean, I hear so much about this. It's long overdue that I get involved and hire influencers to promote my product.
Yeah.
But like, I don't even know what insights are most important. Like, where do I even start? What would you tell them, or maybe some of the areas to look into first?
Yeah, I mean, so I think first is to try to get an understanding of what influencer marketing really is. So you're not when you're working with influencers, it's not Google ads. You're not just like buying an ad on their website, and it's not affiliate. You're not just giving. They're not just your salesperson. Those are other totally legitimate tactics that you can execute either instead of or alongside your influencer marketing strategy. That's great. But just to understand what it really does, in my view, it's really about building your brand. It's about like telling a story about your brand and helping to shape the perception of what does your brand mean to people. So if that's not important to you, then you probably shouldn't be doing influencer marketing. Like if it doesn't really matter to you because, maybe you're, I don't know, maybe you're just a brand where like the brand differentiation just doesn't matter that much. People are just going to decide purely on price or something like that. I don't know. Then maybe it's fine. You should do some other tactics. But if you're in a category where it really does matter what people think about your brand, and you really are trying to get people to identify with, your values and what your brand means, then influencer marketing can be a really good tool for that. I think that, then you start drilling down into like, okay, we know kind of what influencer marketing should do, which is help us build our brand and tell a story about our brand. But then like, what are we actually trying to do on this specific execution? Is this just about awareness? Like, are we just trying to get as many people to hear the name, InfluenceKit as possible? Or are we more interested in conveying like a particular message or engaging with people? So that's how I think you start to pick out what are the metrics that you're actually going to look at to tell you whether you did a good job. So, for InfluenceKit, all of our reports show impressions, views, and engagements. Impressions is like a billboard. Like 100,000 people drove by the billboard. Awesome. That could be good if that was your goal, but it doesn't mean that they actually looked at the billboard, and they might have been like, doing their makeup in the car or something like that. And then views is like the next step down. That's like they actually looked at the thing. They read a blog post, they clicked play on a YouTube video, that sort of thing. So now okay, this many people actually started to interact and see the content that we put out there. And then engagements is like, that's the top. That's this many people actually liked or commented or shared or took some kind of meaningful action to engage with your content. I think those give you some levers that you can start to like pull on to to have a better understanding of what your campaign did. You may have had like super, super high engagement, but not very, very high impressions. So like, okay, that's good, but you just didn't reach all that many people. So now you can start making decisions about what you want to do going forward. Maybe we actually just want to reach more people. We need to work with an influencer who just has a much bigger audience.
I think to share my experience with it, I think it's like the ease of access to get all of the data and insights that you're looking for, right? That are like requested regularly on pretty much every single campaign. And I love it too. And I mentioned this earlier. I just think it's so key that you guys are also empowering the influencers at the same time.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just think that with any company, it's so important to like align yourselves with a company that has like a similar vision for how you operate in the world. And I just think that's a really special thing that you guys are focused on, and makes sense since your backgrounds, you've done
That's
it.
us. Yeah, we are our own first customers for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's the best. And then, so we end every episode with a list of get to know you questions.
Okay.
Definitely feel like we got to know you quite a bit. And I appreciate that. Definitely got to know InfluenceKit a little bit. And, we're going to enjoy the heck out of your demo during our upcoming demo event showcase. But I also want to get to know you a little bit more. So without further ado, I'm going to ask you some get to know you questions.
She did not warn me that you was going to do this. Okay.
I did not.
This is like totally off the cuff here.
I did not. Perfect. That's what we hope that it could be. So I'm going to ask you a few questions and just give me the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So first question, finish this sentence. My life changed when?
When my first kid was born, my life changed overnight.
How old is she now?
She is 12.
Oh, I love that so much.
And she's been at camp for the last 2 weeks, totally out of communication. So we have no idea. I mean, I'm sure she's fine, but we're just like, hopefully she comes home.
What kind of camp is she at? Just like a general summer camp?
No, it's like a wilderness trail camp. She's like out in the wilderness in a canoe for like 10 days.
Oh my God. She's going to come back and be like, I don't want to go back to school. That was the best experience ever. My next question. What advice would you give to others who want to follow in your footsteps?
Whew, man, it's weird to think about, if anybody following in my footsteps, but I would say, one piece of advice I think is really useful is when in doubt, start. That's one that somebody told me a long time ago. So, you've oftentimes find yourself in these situations where you're not sure and there's a million options and it's not clear what the best thing to do is. And it's easy to get kind of bogged down, researching things or just kind of going around in circles. I just think it's good to keep that in mind. When in doubt, get started. You'll build the plane as you're flying it. That's kind of how most businesses are meant to grow. And you'll figure it out as you go.
That's such good advice. That's so good. What is your favorite social media app?
Lately, actually, it's Twitter, believe it or not. I was not on Twitter for like 10 years and had no interest in Twitter, but now I have like a really good small list of people that I follow, and I ignore like all the noise and stuff. And I just have like a few people. And I feel like that really, like I see everything I need to see, whether it's articles or new software things that are coming out. Like it's a nice curated feed of things that I actually care about.
Every individual feed needs to be like perfectly curated. Like that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
And last but not least, what is your favorite vacation spot?
Encinitas, California is probably my favorite spot right now. We spent 3 months there this winter. It was amazing. It's like a little bubble where it's always 72 degrees and like low humidity. And I learned to surf, which was really cool. So it's a very, very cool little town. It's a little beach town north of San Diego.
That's awesome. That's good to know. So if anyone's looking for a really cool spot in California or like a road trip,
Yep.
that's the place to be. Bruno, thank you so much for joining us today. It's cool to get to know you, get to know your product, get to know your backgrounds, all that good stuff. So thank you. If any of our listeners or anyone watching on YouTube wants to get in touch with you and just connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Bruno at influencekit.com is the best way. I check that all the time. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions or feedback.
Awesome. Or just to say hello. We're all about connections here.
Totally.
Yeah. Bruno's a cool guy. I can vouch. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure.
Cool. Thank you.